Prudent Scholars in association with Goa Headmasters Association.
Good day, students. Today I am going to teach a very interesting lesson to you, but before I begin, I would like to tell you something about the infinite capabilities that the human beings possess. We human beings have got the capability of thinking with a lot of awareness. I remember the words of French philosopher named as Descartes, and he said that I think and therefore I am. So we human beings are blessed with the power of infinite intelligence and thinking. The scientists such as Albert Einstein, Galileo, Newton, Abdul Kalam and all the other scientists, they use the power of their thinking and their intelligence to achieve a lot of success in their lives. Now, we human beings are also very blessed with the power of inquisitiveness. We are very curious human beings. We love to ask this question, why? We love to make inquiry. Whenever we come across any new thing, any particular good thing, we try to spend a lot of time on that particular thing to inquire how that particular thing works. So, because of this power of inquisitiveness, we human beings or the greatest of scientists, they discovered a lot of gadgets or a lot of things. So, we human beings right from the old age, right from the ancient times, we were very attracted towards flying. We were very fascinated with flying. And we human beings also wanted to discover how to fly. Now, I have used the picture of Superman over here because you find these sci-fi movies wherein these human beings, they have this ability of flying. Now, in the future, you never know. Maybe we will come up with the human being who is able to fly in the sky. So, right from the old age, the ancestors, they were very fascinated with flying. Whenever they used to see any bird or any eagle, they used to get very attracted and they used to get inspired by this bird or eagle, and they also felt like flying. Now, because of this, there were some certain set of people who invested a lot in this art called as flying. For example, the Wright brothers, you must have heard of Wright brothers. They invented a gadget, they invented a particular machine which can fly. Now, in our Ramayana as well, there is a reference to Ravana, and this Ravana, he abducts Sita by using a flying machine. So, in our mythology as well, there are references to flying machine. But then, in the modern times, this Wright brothers, they invented aeroplane, and then they were able to fly their first aeroplane on December 17, 1903. Now, you must be wondering, why am I telling you all these things about flying? Now, I am telling you all these things about flying because today I am going to deal with a lesson that is related to flying. So, as you already know, I have taught the first chapter of this third lesson named as 2 stories about flying. So I have already taught the first lesson, that is His First Flight by Liam O'Flaherty, and today I am going to deal with the second story, and the title of the story is The Black Aeroplane by Frederick Foseth. Now this is a very interesting story, my students. The second story is very interesting, and it is about a pilot. The story revolves around a pilot who is lost in the storm. Now this pilot is lost in the storm because of a weakness. We human beings have got a lot of weaknesses within us. So this pilot had a weakness of daydreaming. So when you have this habit of daydreaming, what happens is you are not able to make the correct judgment. So this pilot, he is not able to make correct judgment when he was flying because of his habit of daydreaming. So we will see whether this particular pilot, whether he fought with the storm in a very successful manner, or whether he succumbed to the pressure. Okay, so we will see what happens to the pilot in this story called as The Black Aeroplane. Now before moving on to the story, I would just like to tell you something about the author of this lesson. The author of this lesson is Frederick Foseth. He is a British author, English author, and he was known for his thrillers. He used to write a lot of mysterious thrillers, and he is well known for his novels such as The Day of the Jackal, then The Fourth Protocol, The Dogs of War, The Feast of God, The Veteran, Avenger, The Afghan, and The Cobra. So he was very popular as a writer, and a lot of people are in love with his writing. So let us focus on this lesson now. So as I have already told you, the title of the lesson is The Black Aeroplane, written by Frederick Foseth. I have already told you the background of the story as well as the background of the author. So now I am going to read the text and I am going to explain the lesson. So I want your rapt attention now. I am going to read the first paragraph, and I have typed the key points on this slide for your better understanding. So I am going to read it now. The Black Aeroplane by Frederick Foseth. The moon was coming up in the east behind me, and stars were shining in the clear sky above me. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I was happy to be alone high up above the sleeping countryside. I was flying my old Dakota aeroplane over France back to England. I was dreaming of my holiday and looking forward to being with my family. I looked at my watch, 1:30 in the morning. Now, as I have already told you, the story revolves around the pilot. Now here, the pilot is flying an aeroplane, and he is flying an old Dakota aeroplane, and he is flying, he is having a very smooth journey in the sky, and this pilot is in a very good mood. Now remember, students, that this pilot has gone to France, he has gone to Paris, he has already gone to Paris, and now he is returning back to England. He is on his way to England. Now while he is on his way to England, this pilot is feeling very happy. He is feeling very happy, and he is in a very good mood because the weather, the climate in the sky is very pleasurable. The climate in the sky is very good. For example, the moon was coming in the east direction, and the moon was looking very beautiful. Then the stars were twinkling in the sky, the stars were shining in the sky, and there was not even a single single black cloud in the sky, and because of this, the pilot was in a very good mood and he was itching to go home. He wanted to go back to England, that is his hometown. So he wants to go to England and he wants to have a very good English breakfast. So he is waiting to meet his family members. He wants to rejoice with his family members by eating a very good, exquisite English breakfast. And then he just looks at the watch. When he looks at the watch, he realizes that it is 1:30 in the morning, so it is midnight. And then he also realizes that all the people in the countryside, they were all sleeping. He figured out that all the people in the countryside, they were sleeping. The meaning of countryside is a village. Okay, so at this moment, the aeroplane was above a village and he figured out, the pilot figured out, as it is midnight, all the people were sleeping and he was enjoying his journey. Now, this is the end of the first paragraph. So I've covered all these points. So now I will move on to the next paragraph. I should call Paris control soon, I thought, as I looked down past the nose of the aeroplane. I saw the lights of a big city in front of me. I switched on the radio and said, Paris control, Dakota DS088 here. Can you hear me? I'm on my way to England, over. Now, what happens is, as you all know, this pilot is in a very good mood. He is flying his old Dakota aeroplane and he is having a very good time of his life. What happens next is, he thought of calling Paris control room. He felt like calling Paris control room. Now, what is this control room? This control room is a place wherein there are a lot of computers and there are technicians and engineers in the Paris control room. They check where the aeroplane is in the sky and they also give instructions to the pilots. So here, this narrator of the story, now remember students that the narrator of the story is this pilot who is flying this old Dakota aeroplane. Okay. So here the narrator or the pilot, he wants to listen to the instructions. He wants some guidelines from the technicians who are there in the Paris control room. So that's why he thought about calling Paris control room. And then he just looked at the front part of the Dakota aeroplane. He just looked at the nose of the aeroplane, that is the front part of the aeroplane. He just looked at it and then he saw that the lights in the city, they were glittering. Okay, he saw that the lights in the Paris city, they were all glittering. Now you all know that this Paris is a very beautiful country. It has Eiffel Tower. So he was able to see the shining lights, bright lights in the city, and then he called the Paris control room. He called the technicians who were sitting in the Paris control room. And then when he gave a call, he used his radio, okay, or walkie-talkie. Okay, he used his radio or walkie-talkie. Now, what happened is, after calling this Paris control room, he asked a question. What did he ask? He asked, and now there's a way of speaking on walkie-talkie. Okay, this is how he spoke. This is how the pilot spoke. Paris control Dakota DS088 here. Can you hear me? He just asked the technicians whether they can hear him, and then he also told the technicians of the Paris control room that he is on his way to England. He is going back to England. Okay, and then we'll see what happens. And then what happened was, the voice from the radio answered me immediately. DS088, I can hear you. you ought to turn 12 degrees west now, DS088 over. Okay. And then what happened is, when this pilot gave a call to Paris control room, the technicians from the Paris control room, they gave an immediate feedback to this pilot, and they gave a feedback to the pilot, and they told the pilot, or they instructed the pilot to just turn his Dakota aeroplane 12 degrees in the west direction. And this is what the technicians from the Paris control room instructed this pilot, or the narrator pilot. Okay. So he was all ready to follow the instructions of the technicians of the Paris control room. Okay. And then we will see what happens next. I checked the map and the compass, switched over to my second and last fuel tank, and turned the Dakota 12 degrees west towards England. I'll be in time for breakfast, I thought. A good big English breakfast. Everything was going well. It was an easy flight. So as soon as he was given instructions by the Paris control room, this pilot, he just got hold of his compass. He just holded his compass in the hand. Now what is the meaning of compass? A compass is an instrument which shows direction to the people. Okay. So now these air pilots or the sailors, they need this instrument called as compass. Okay. So immediately when he was instructed by the Paris control room, this pilot, he just got hold of his compass, and he just checked the compass. He just checked the direction on the compass, and then as per the instructions of the Paris control room, he just turned his aeroplane 12 degrees in the west direction. And then while doing this, this pilot, he also switched on his second fuel tank. Now these Dakota aeroplanes, they have two fuel tanks. So he switched on his second fuel tank because the fuel from the first tank was over, it was exhausted. So that's why he switched on his second fuel tank. And then he was very, very eager to go back to England. He again started daydreaming, and he started dreaming about his family as well as a very, very good English breakfast. Okay. So he wanted to have this sausages, he wanted to have a good nice juice, wanted to have bread and butter, wanted to have sausages, wanted to have a very good omelette. So he was eager to have all these things in England, and he again started dreaming about this. And it was a very, very pleasant journey for him, and that's why he has stated that it was a very, very easy flight. So let us see what happens next. Paris was about 150 kilometers behind me when I saw the clouds. Storm clouds, they were huge. They looked like black mountains standing in front of me across the sky. I knew I could not fly up and over them, and I did not have enough fuel to fly around them to the north or south. What happened next was very, very unpredictable and unfortunate. Our life is full of mysteries, and it is full of unpredictable things. So as the pilot was thinking that he was having a very, very good journey, immediately what happened was he was able to see big clouds as the pilot realized that he has traveled 150 kilometers ahead of Paris. As the pilot was flying, the pilot realized that he had traveled 150 kilometers ahead of Paris. So that's why he says that Paris was 150 kilometers behind him. And then what happens next is very, very unpredictable. This pilot had not thought about this. So surprisingly and shockingly, the pilot was able to see big clouds. He saw big clouds in front of him. He saw lightning in front of him, and the clouds that he saw were very, very gigantic. They were very, very huge, and they were storm clouds. The pilot realized that he was watching the storm clouds. And then he got very, very scared. He got very, very frightened. He did not know what to do. And that's why the pilot has written over here that these clouds, they were as huge as the mountains. These clouds that he saw, these black clouds that he saw, they were very, very big as the mountains. And then the pilot was more worried because there was not enough fuel in his second tank to just go over the black clouds or to go round or to go around the black clouds by taking north or south direction. So because of all these things, the pilot was very frightened, he was more worried, and he did not know what to do next. So we will see whether the pilot is able to fight with the storm or not. Now here the pilot is very, very perplexed. He doesn't know what he has to do. So now we will see what he does next, how he reacts to this calamity. So as the human beings face danger, the character of a person depends on how the person reacts to this calamity. So we will see how the pilot reacts to this calamity. Now what happened next was, I ought to go back to Paris, I thought, but I wanted to get home. I wanted that breakfast. I'll take the risk, I thought, and flew that old Dakota straight into the storm. So what happened next is, the pilot, the narrator pilot, he thought of going back to Paris again because he encountered these big clouds, big dark clouds, as well as this storm. So he just thought of going back to Paris. But then his conscience, his inner feeling told him to just hang out there and to fight with the storm because he wanted to have a very good English breakfast. He wanted to be with his family. He wanted to meet his family members and he wanted to eat a very good English breakfast. So that's why what he decided, the pilot vowed, the pilot took a firm decision that now, come what may, he will fight with the storm. Come what may, he will hang out there and he will face the storm. So this is what the pilot decides. And then we will see what happens. Inside the clouds, everything was suddenly black. It was impossible to see anything outside the aeroplane. The old aeroplane jumped and twisted in the air. I looked at the compass. I couldn't believe my eyes. The compass was turning round and round and round. It was dead. It would not work. The other instruments were suddenly dead too. I tried the radio. Then, as you know, the pilot decides that he'll fight with the storm. So that's why the pilot, he went through the clouds. He went through the clouds. He went inside the clouds. And as soon as he went inside the clouds, he was not able to see anything. He was not able to see anything. Everything was very, very invisible outside because there was darkness all around. So that's why the pilot was not able to see anything. And then the old aeroplane just jumped and twisted. It just jumped and twisted because the pilot was not able to see anything. Now, for example, it is raining heavily these days, and when we drive our vehicle, we are not able to see clearly, and that's why sometimes what happens is sometimes our vehicle goes deep in the ditch sometimes. Okay, so the same thing happens to this pilot. He is not able to see clearly. That's why the aeroplane just jumps and twists, and then the pilot, he just wants to check the direction. He just wanted to check where his aeroplane is. He wanted to check whether he is in the right direction or not. So that's why he just got hold of his compass, and when he just got hold of his compass in his hand, when he saw the compass, he found out, to his utter surprise and shock and to his horror, that this arrows in the compass, they just started turning round and round and round, as I've shown here. Okay, so that's why he got very, very scared. The pilot got very, very scared, and then he tried to call the Paris control room. He tried to call the Paris control room by using the radio. He also realized that all the other instruments in the aeroplane, they went dead. They were all dead. Okay, and that's why the pilot was very, very scared and frightened. And now we will see what the pilot does next. Paris control, can you hear me? There was no answer. The radio was dead too. I had no radio, no compass, and I could not see where I was. I was lost in the storm. Then in the black clouds quite near me, I saw another aeroplane. It had no lights on its wings, but I could see it flying next to me through the storm. I could see the pilot's face towards me. I was very glad to see another person. He lifted one hand and waved. What happens next is very, very unusual. What happens is, this pilot, he tries to call the Paris control room by using his radio, by using walkie-talkie, but then he realizes that this walkie-talkie or this radio, it has stopped working. He realizes that his radio was also dead. So he did not get any answer from the Paris control room. Now, as the aeroplane was just lost in the storm, there was no signal to the radio. For example, now because of this heavy rain, yesterday the network of VI, that is Vodafone and Idea, it was all lost. I mean, there was no network. The Vodafone as well as Idea, they did not have network yesterday because of this heavy rainfall. Now, same thing happens to the pilot as well. What happens is, because he was very, very lost in the storm, he just doesn't get response from the Paris control room because there is no signal out there. So that's why he doesn't get response from the Paris control room. His radio stops working, and then he realizes that his radio, his compass, and all the other instruments in the aeroplane, they were all dead. And now he was feeling very, very frightened, and he was feeling much worried at the same time because there was not enough of fuel in his second tank. So he felt very, very depressed because he was all alone in the storm and he was totally lost in the storm. And then suddenly he saw a ray of hope in between this calamity. What he saw next was, just at a distance, this narrator pilot, he was able to see another aeroplane which was black in color. So he was able to see a black aeroplane just at a distance, and he also saw a pilot sitting inside the cabin of this black aeroplane. The moment the narrator pilot saw another pilot who was sitting in the black aeroplane, this narrator pilot, he felt very, very relieved and relaxed because he thought that the other pilot who was sitting in the black aeroplane, he thought that he must have come to help him. So that's why the narrator pilot felt very relieved. And when he saw the sight of the other pilot, this narrator pilot, he felt at peace and it boosted his morale, it boosted his self-confidence. For example, whenever your teacher tells you to go on that stage and speak, the moment you are helped by your friend or the moment your friend stands near you, you feel a little better. So, in the same manner, when the narrator pilot saw another pilot in this storm, he felt relieved. He felt that at least someone is giving me company in this storm. So, that's why he felt a bit relaxed. And then he saw that the other pilot who was sitting in the black aeroplane, that other pilot, he was just waving at the narrator pilot, and he was signaling to the narrator pilot to just follow him. Okay, so the other pilot was just telling the narrator pilot just to follow him. So we will see what happens next. Follow me, he was saying, follow me. He knows that I am lost, I thought. He is trying to help me. He turned his aeroplane slowly to the north in front of my Dakota so that it would be easier for me to follow him. I was very happy to go behind the strange aeroplane like an obedient child. So what happens is this other pilot, he just waves at the narrator pilot, and when the narrator pilot sees this other pilot who was waving at him, he felt that this other pilot has come for his rescue. He feels that the other pilot has come to help him because he was lost in the storm. So that's why the narrator pilot, he feels very, very relaxed and relieved. And then what he saw next was, he saw that the other aeroplane, which was black in color, he saw that the pilot who was sitting inside the black aeroplane, that other pilot, he just turned his aeroplane towards the north direction. Okay, just in front of the narrator pilot, this other pilot who had come for his rescue, he just turned his black aeroplane towards the north direction in front of him because he wanted the narrator pilot to just follow him, because he wanted the narrator pilot to just go behind him. Okay, so when the other pilot, when he turned his aeroplane towards the north direction, the narrator pilot, what he did was, he followed the other pilot, or he followed the black aeroplane like a very, very obedient child. He just followed the other black aeroplane like a very, very good, obedient boy. Okay, and he was very happy to follow the black aeroplane. Okay, and then we will see what happens next. After half an hour, the strange black aeroplane was still there in front of me in the clouds. Now there was only enough fuel in the old Dakota's last tank to fly for 5 or 10 minutes more. I was starting to feel frightened again, but then he started to go down and I followed through the storm. And then what happens is, this narrator pilot, he just hangs out there in the sky, and like an obedient child, he just follows this black aeroplane for half an hour. When he follows the black aeroplane for half an hour, immediately the narrator pilot, he realizes that the fuel in his second fuel tank was very, very insufficient, and he got more worried because this narrator pilot, he thought that his fuel in the second tank will last for only 5 to 10 minutes. He realizes that he will be only able to use his fuel for another 5 to 10 minutes. So that's why he got very, very frightened and afraid again. Okay, he was sweating because he felt that maybe he will die and maybe his aeroplane will crash because of insufficient fuel. Okay, and then what happens next is, but still he follows the black aeroplane, and then immediately he realizes that the black aeroplane which was in front of him, it was just going down, it was just going downwards. When the black aeroplane just started going downwards, the narrator pilot also did the same thing. The narrator pilot also followed the black aeroplane and he also started to go down. He also started going downwards. Okay, and then we will see what happens next. Suddenly, I came out of the clouds and saw two long straight lines of lights in front of me. It was a runway, an airport. I was safe. I turned to look for my friend in the black aeroplane, but the sky was empty. There was nothing there. The black aeroplane was gone. I could not see it anywhere. And what happens next is, when this narrator pilot just follows the black aeroplane and when it just goes downwards, suddenly to the pilot's surprise, suddenly to the narrator pilot's surprise, he just realized that suddenly out of nowhere, he just got out of the clouds. He was just not able to see the black clouds. Suddenly he realized that he was out of the clouds now and he was able to see a very, very clear weather, crystal clear weather. He was able to see crystal clear weather. He did not see any black clouds, and then suddenly this narrator pilot, he suddenly realizes that he suddenly sees two straight lines in front of him, and he also sees lights, sparkling lights in front of him. And then he realizes that he was safe. The narrator pilot, he realizes that he was safe, and when he sees these two white lines ahead of him and when he sees these lights, he realizes that he has landed his Dakota aeroplane on the runway of the airport. So just like this, he lands. Okay, he realizes that he has landed his aeroplane on the runway, and that is why he sees two white lines and lights ahead of him, and he realizes that he is on a runway now and he has reached on an airport. And then immediately when he lands his Dakota aeroplane, he just turns back. The narrator pilot just turns back because he wants to see where the black aeroplane is and where the pilot is. He wanted to see who had helped me. He wanted to meet the pilot who had helped him. So that's why he just turned back his head and he just turned back to see whether he can see the black aeroplane as well as the pilot. But then, to his surprise, he was not able to see the black aeroplane as well as the pilot. And then we will see what happens. I landed and was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota near the control tower. I went and asked a woman in the control center where I was and who the other pilot was. I wanted to say thank you. So what happens next is, this narrator pilot, he realizes that he has landed the aeroplane on the runway of an airport, and then he has written that he was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota aeroplane. Now, he has written this, that he was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota plane as soon as he reached on that particular airport. He has written this because this particular Dakota aeroplane has given him a lot of trouble, and he has fought with the storm by being in this old Dakota aeroplane. And because he has taken a lot of trouble, because he has taken a lot of hardships, he wants to forget this episode, and that's why he has written that he was not sorry to walk away from the old Dakota plane when he reached on the airport. And immediately when he reached on the airport, he just left his Dakota aeroplane and he went straight in the control room. He went straight in the control room, and in the control room he saw a woman. A woman was there in the control room, and that woman, she was keeping a track of the air traffic. She was keeping a track of the air traffic or the aeroplanes in the sky. So this narrator pilot, he just went inside the control room and he saw this woman. And when he saw the woman, he just approached the woman and asked the woman who the other pilot was who helped him, and he also asked her where he had reached. And then when he asked these questions to the woman just looked at him with dumbstruck expressions. When he asked the woman who had helped him in the storm and who had helped him, or where he had reached, or on which place he had reached. When he asked these questions to the lady just looked at him with dumbstruck expressions. And then we will see what happens. She looked at me very strangely and then laughed. Another aeroplane up there in the storm? No other aeroplanes were flying tonight. Yours was the only one I could see on the radar. So what happens is, when he asks these questions, when the narrator pilot asks these questions to the lady or to the woman just looks at him with dumbstruck expressions, and she replies that there was no other aeroplane in the sky other than you. She replied that there was only one aeroplane in the sky, and that aeroplane, it belonged to you. Yours was the only aeroplane which was flying in the sky. This is what she told the narrator pilot. And she also told the narrator pilot that she could see only the narrator pilot's Dakota aeroplane in the sky on her radar. Okay. Now, what is the meaning of radar? Now, this radar is a system that uses radio waves for finding the position of moving objects. Okay. So, a radar is a system which detects the movement of the aeroplane in the sky. Okay. So, this lady told the narrator pilot that she could only see the narrator pilot's aeroplane in the sky in her radar. Okay. And when the narrator pilot heard this answer from the lady, he got very confused. He was in utter shock and utter dilemma, because he just couldn't figure out who was the person who helped him, or who was the pilot who helped him, and how he was able to reach there in the sky, and he just asked this question to himself, that who helped me to arrive there safely without a compass or a radio and without any more fuel in my tanks? Who was the pilot on the strange black aeroplane flying in the storm without lights? So he had a big question in his mind, and the question was, who helped him to arrive safely on the airport without any sufficient fuel, or without the help of compass as well as the other instrument? And who was the pilot on the strange black aeroplane which was without lights. So these were the big questions in the mind of this pilot. So he just couldn't figure out who was the person, who was the pilot who helped him to come out of the storm. Now, maybe what I feel is, according to my opinion, I feel that maybe it is the subconscious mind of the narrator pilot which has helped me, or which has helped him to just fight the storm. Or maybe the subconscious mind of the narrator pilot has helped the narrator pilot to just come out of the storm. Maybe because the pilot was encountering a very, very difficult situation, maybe he must have hallucinated, or maybe his inner conscience or his subconscious mind must have helped him to just fight with the storm or to just go out with the storm. This is one possibility. And the second possibility might be, maybe God must have helped this narrator pilot to come out of the storm. Okay. So this is all about this lesson. I hope you have understood this lesson. So this is just the summary of the lesson. Okay. So this is the summary. A pilot of Old Dakota flies in the midnight over Paris towards England, and he dreams of having a very good holiday with his family, wants to have breakfast. Then unfortunately he passes through huge clouds, then his compass, his radio, all the instruments stopped working. Suddenly he notices the black aeroplane, and then the pilot of the other aeroplane instructs him to follow. Then he follows like an obedient child, but in the meantime his fuel tank gets exhausted. Suddenly he notices a row of light, and he lands safely on the airport, and he goes to the control room and asks the lady who was the person who had helped him. But then when he asked this question to the lady just replies that his was the only aeroplane that she could see on the radar, and that's why he gets confused, he is in dilemma, and he doesn't know who has helped him or who was the person who helped him to come out of the storm. Okay. So this is the summary of this lesson. Now these are some important questions that you need to remember. So who do you think helped the narrator to reach safely? Discuss this among yourself and give reasons for your answer. I've already told the answer of this question. Probably it was the narrator's own self that helped him through the storm. There was no other plane in the storm, as the woman at the control center could see only his plane on the radar. Also, no other plane was flying that night. In his fear, he might have been hallucinating. He was a good pilot, and it might have been his own self that must have helped him. Okay, so this is a very important question from this lesson, and this is the second question which is important. Why does the narrator say, I landed and was not sorry to walk away from the Old Dakota? The answer is, after landing, the narrator was not sorry to walk away from the Old Dakota because he had a horrific and scary experience flying that plane. He was happy that he had landed the plane safely. That is why he was not sorry to walk away. Instead, he wanted to know where he was and who the other pilot was. Okay. So these are the important questions which might come in the exam. So this is the end of the lesson, and I hope that you have understood this lesson. So a very all the best to you for your upcoming exam. Thank you very much.